Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. I'm here to continue my read along of the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound. No, this is not a rerun. You guys, if you guys seen the live stream last night, you get the joke. I'm at the 1991 revival series. I'm getting ready to read episode 10 and go forward from there. I'm I've really enjoyed this. This has been a really fun read for me. I'm gonna give a review by the end, obviously. Episode 10: The family buries Barnabas, and Josette prepares to leave for Boston. Pleased that the book from the future was seemingly inaccurate about her date and mode of death, Joshua moves everyone into Collinwood. And when Barnabas rises, the new vampire finds considerable privacy in the old house. He feeds off of Millicent and a local prostitute, gaining the curiosity of Trask, who sees him as a demon. Shortly before she is to depart, Josette goes to the old house where she sees Barnabas as a vampire and embraces him nonetheless. With the rising of Barnabas, the core of Dark Shadows finally solidifies. As with all of the 1790 half of the 1991 series, this is a beautiful, polished, classy, and passionate retelling. The writing has energy, economy, and poetry overall. The most outstanding dimension of the remake is in the cast. Dan Curtis has a remarkable good eye for crafting an ensemble, and each performance feels more winning than the last. Sorry. As I noted before, they really solidify in the 1790 sequence, and their confidence with the characters and each other is confident in the sincerity of the drama and the wit in this one. It's largely thanks to Jim Fave, whose Ben Loomis is the straight shooting, enthusiastic, ironic best friend every hero needs. If there is any element in the episode where the storytelling loses its footing, it's in the interpretation of the vampire. It's a shameful music video depiction, leaving Ben Cross looking like a hybrid of Billy Idol, Jeff Piccoli, and Greg Wasson at the end of Body Double. He hisses and snarls, and just know what's more poignant about all of this is that Cross makes great choices under this drag. He plays the soft pedal with clarity and humanity as he alternately represses, reveals, and even reviles in his new condition. It's the makeup and mugging that distracts from it all. Favorite and most suitable moment. After his first night, Barnabas awakens in a cellar. The first thing he does is run his fingers under his teeth, checking for fangs. His reaction, a very slight flicker or relief that never settles. Perfect, just perfect. The rest of the cast bucks up just as admirably, and it feels as close to masterpiece theater as Dark Shadows got. Take a decent actor, put them in contemporary clothes, and you see a decent actor. What is it about aristocratic, historic grab that makes him look like a genius? This is really clear when we flash forward to 1991, and the whole thing just feels leading. 1791, a grand story for a grand cast. As a then California when the revival first aired, I can attest that the Gulf War made watching the show a nightmare due to constant interruptions and reschedulings, and trying to get a friend to watch. They were even more hopelessly lost. Dark Shadows. Sometimes you seem cursed. By this point, the war was over, but the damage was done. Look at how the dates line up. The show premiered on January 13th and 14th with the first 3 episodes. Highly rated, so far so good. 3 days later, on January 17th, military operations began. The next day, January 18th, episode 4 aired on the East Coast. On the West Coast, question mark. Just before it begins, Iraq launches Scud missiles at Israel. So yeah, no show that night for us, at least on time. This was a really critical episode because it would have been the first in the regular time slot, training the public about where the show was. Episode 5 on January 25th aired on the day when Iraq troops spilled millions of gallons of crude oil into the Gulf. Something of a news item. There were 3 unpredictable episodes in February, and by the time the show wrapped up with its last 4 episodes, the war was over, but the damage was done. Other trivia: this episode was directed by Rob Bowman. Hold on! Rob Bowman, who abandoned the WB Dark Shadows pilot many years later to direct Elektra, which was its own reward. Unfortunately, the new director, P.J. Hogan, largely crashed the WB pilot with nutty stylization. On this day in 1991, U.S. troops arrived home from the war, and Iraq releases a number of journalists and 2 captured American soldiers. The day came when I had to write an episode. With the death of Dan Curtis, episode 12 of the 1991 Dark Shadows became the last real exploration of his original version. The entire series is a troubling subject for me because it was not successful. And if a full-blown, lavish, big-budget, beautifully acted, prestigious creation edition of Dark Shadows could not be a success, the sinister implication is that there is some flaw in the concept itself. I don't know if that's true. I certainly don't want to think that that's true. Perhaps it means that the real success of Dark Shadows was a creature in a very specific period of time. Ultimately, I believe that the show was too revert. Dark Shadows 1966 was a response to its time. Dark Shadows 1991 was arguably a very pretty rendition of that response. 25 years too late, in essence. It was kind of like watching your grandmother twerk. Dark Shadows, the motion picture, is a lot like watching Gene Roddenberry twerk. It's a very attractive movie, but it also feels paralyzed by its desire to legitimize itself. But that's not what the original Star Trek was doing. The original Star Trek was responding to the headlines of the 1960s. As I've said before, I think Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is one of the Rosetta Stones to which we need to look. Perhaps it was not a response to the 1980s, but it was a response to Star Trek itself, to the sense of family that the audience found within the corridors of the Enterprise. That's why the best moments of DS91 are between Willie and Barnabas. Those are moments where even if that series is not about 1991, they are most certainly about Dark Shadows, which is the reason we are there too. Episode 12. In 1791, Vicky awaits execution while Barnabas accidentally drives his mother into near catatonic, delusional madness. A snooping Abigail meets her end at Barnabas's hands, and Joshua, discovering this, arranges for Trask to visit via Ben Loomis. Barnabas and Ben extract an admission of Vicky's innocence from Trask before walling him up for the public good. Peter Bradford takes the document with him to a magistrate, but Angelique's powers cause it to be forgotten. Meanwhile, Sarah dies, having hidden from Barnabas on a cold Maine night. Daniel barely lives thanks to Vicky's knowledge of treating fevers. Barnabas begs his father to kill him, but he cannot. Instead, he assigns Ben to chain his son forever in the mausoleum in the present. Maggie breaks Julia's strange possession, only to become possessed by Angelique herself. At a certain point, it almost resembles the end of The Wild Bunch. Cold, nihilistic, with a slash and burn viciousness regarding its own body count. The episode feels as if they know it's a swan song before the royal regurgitating of the Gulf War, and NBC's lackadaisical management. Not the case, however. This was filmed in November of 1990, months before they would go to air. Still, it exists in the context of the best of both worlds. And even if they weren't Trekkies, the creative team now lived in a world where genre television went there. Again, there's almost nothing unsatisfying about these 1790 episodes of the 1991 series. Grand and sumptuous in every regard, they use handsome appointments to highlight what's already the star, the writing. These are dense episodes full of action and plot after the occasional pokey first six installments. I don't know how they play for those unfamiliar with the show, but excluding the missing Nathan Forbes, this really demonstrates how arguably labored the plot piled the 1795 sequence in the original series could get. Especially in episode 12, we get a constant barrage of heartbreaks and triumphs, including wacky exorcism, and the end of Abigail, Sarah, and a drunken Trask. The performances are as fine as the best in genre television, with the special kudos going to the entire cast. Stefan Grouch and Gene Simmons handle Naomi's descent into madness with the tenderness and dignity, and Jurish's stony heart continues to crumble as he becomes perhaps the saddest collateral damage of all of this. The one cursed to survive. Alone with him is Jim Faze playing a deeply sentimental man with a stability that adds a resonant counterpoint to the bored approach he explored as Willie. I remember communicating over Prodigy with young Gordon Levitt, who implored fellow prodigans to hector NBC, which I did. I knew it was hopeless, but it was something. I would have been far more perturbed about the cancellation, but the show ended on a satisfyingly high note and never got a chance to get bad. The Gulf War can always be blamed for its ratings failure, and I rarely show it to people who don't deeply enjoy it. The show is a great ambassador for the franchise, and I hope it will continue to be honored as such. On this day in 1991, NBC made a big, dumb mistake. Mitch Ryan remembered twice. Mitch Ryan died. Normally, we use emphasis for these sort of things. We lost so and so, or such and such went too soon, as if there is some more appropriate time. But of all of the Dark Shadows cast members, none projected honest and uncompromising integrity like Mitch Ryan. It feels fundamentally disrespectful to dress it up something other than a plain and honest fact when referring to his death. The world is as straightforward is the world the word is as straightforward as the character he played, and as pained. Burt Devlin was the show's first troubled hero. We absolutely wanted to get behind, but his extremity held us back. And besides, we're sort of trying to root for the Collins family, but there he is, episode after episode. He's there for Vicky. He's there for David. He's there for us. He was a menace. He was a friend. And in every phase, he was unbelievable. I think of few other actors who could project that kind of tortured ambiguity. It was a human mystery, and it compelled Victoria's imagination as much as any ghost or phantom parent. He welcomed us to Collinsport in every sense, and alongside the writers, Mitch Ryan set the eccentric moral landscape that defined the series and drove it forward. Mitch Ryan and Jonathan Frid shared the same most important quality in their performance. They were able to embody two diametrically opposed states of mind without creating a contradiction. The fascination generated by that strange and unique ability compelled viewers to keep watching, unable to guess where those men might ultimately go. Ryan was no stranger to conflict. His exit from the show was driven by a poignant battle with alcoholism, and the evidence becomes increasingly obvious as his time on the series goes on. The struggle led to a break from acting. For most, that break would be a permanent one. It is to Ryan's credit that he took the recovery process seriously and rebuilt his career within a few years. Soon he was co-starring in the Dirty Harry sequel, Magnaforce, almost nabbed the role of Picard, essayed the villain in Lethal Weapon, took a memorable and recurring role in the hit series Dharma and Greg, and played a pivotal part in the Halloween franchise. Easing into retirement, Ryan found continued opportunities to explore art in painting and writing, publishing his autobiography quite recently. He revived the Burke Devlin character for Big Finish Audio and framed the recent Dark Shadows reproduction of A Christmas Carol, with a fine narration of alternating warmth and gravitas. I interviewed him on Christmas Day 7 years ago and found him to be exactly as warm and accessible as you would imagine. He was a fellow Louisville native, having grown up just a few blocks from where I grew up myself. We are a strange and unique breed in the company of Todd Browning, Muhammad Ali, and Hunter S. Thompson. Mitch Ryan was a fine addition to the list. A Korean War veteran, he began his career on the stage at Barter Theater and remained loyal to live performance, even appearing in A Long Day's Journey into Night at the Pasadena Playhouse in 1993 with fellow Dark Shadows alum Alan Feinstein. He was a lifetime member of the Actors Studio, appearing in Wait Until Dark and The Price on Broadway. Smoothly transitioning to film, his judgment and leadership won him the presidency of the Screen Actors Guild Foundation. Few performances have rebuilt their careers with such dignity and range. It would be a clutch to point out that his self-generated revival made him somewhat of a phoenix. But considering that he battled the phoenix on a program, we'd be remiss not to make a note of it. He built the very definition of a worthy life, and that's exactly the kind of personal character necessary to give Collingwood its true foundation. He welcomed Vicky, the viewers, to the beginning and end of the world. Thanks to his work, though the solution may always be in the wrong order. And a bit more for Mitch. When I wrote the obituary for Mitch Ryan, I also had a show opening that night. It was tough to write for a lot of reasons, but I found myself corresponding tonight about him and the loss, and I think it might be worth sharing. The piece was a bear because he was a virile guy, and although he slipped into old age with exactly that kind of crusty dignity that you would imagine, it was one of those things where it was not unexpected, kind of like Jonathan Frid. When someone went too soon, like Christopher Pennock, or they rolled away in museum of personal conflict, like John Carlin, words came really easily. Mitch Ryan was different. I have a lot of regrets about not meeting him. We got along extremely well when we chatted. Kathleen Lee Scott was really happy with the interview I did. Every word I wrote about his warmth and enthusiasm was genuine. The fact that we would reminisce about Louisville was a huge bonus. I grew up in the very last years where vast swaths of Louisville institutions somehow had carried on from his childhood. I don't know how exact I don't know exactly where his house was down to the mailbox, but I could take you within a few blocks, and it was pretty much a house like mine. He went to the same school as my mom, and I had to dance delicately around the fact that it was about a decade after he graduated. He was 8 years old when she was, he was just a sweetheart. I was going to bring a book on his neighborhood and my neighborhood to the Dark Shadows convention in 2016 when he couldn't make it. I vowed that I would send it to him. I never got around to it. I'm sure he forgot about the whole thing seconds after I made the offer, but it's one of those weird human moments that just kind of hangs on my conscience. Now that the play is over, I actually have the time to sort of sit back, properly mourn. I honestly think he is what made the show what it was at its very core. I think he provided the essential first mystery and sense of masculine ambiguity that propelled the series. It was the baton that Fred picked up. And its marvelously happy life, it's a life where he took the kind of problem that normally dashes people forever and he simply overcame it. Well, I'm sure there was nothing simple about it, but he overcame it. I regret that he didn't get the role of Captain Picard. By the time Patrick Stewart took the part, he had already had a wealth of brilliant opportunities to explore acting. And although Ryan did some great stage work, it was maybe not the same as working year in and year out with John Barton at the RSC. That show would have been a jaw dropping vehicle for him to show and discover what he was put on this earth to do. But despite that, he was just the very best kind of credit to his profession, to the show, and to what we can be. I'm going to stop right there, guys, and then when I come back, I'm going to read about the Dark Shadows of Christmas Carol. You guys have a good day. Link to the Dark Shadows Daybook UnBound will be in the description box. Go pick this up, guys. It's really, really good.